So a movie came out recently called The Bates Haunting, and I knew it probably didn't have anything to do with the original source material, but I was just looking for an excuse to review this, so let's do it. Psycho is directed by Alfred Hitchcock, written by Joseph Stefano. It's based on the book of the same title by Robert Bloch. And this movie stars Anthony Perkins, Janet Leigh, Vera Miles, John Gavin, and Martin Balsam. Psycho starts out being about this woman named Marion Crane who decides to steal $40,000 and pretty much run away from her job and stuff to kind of build a new life with her boyfriend Sam. And on the road, she's really paranoid about stuff, and she ends up staying at this motel, sorry, called the Bates Motel. And here she meets Norman Bates, who is he seems like a really nice guy at first, but it becomes clear that he is pretty much dominated by his mother, who lives up there in the house. And bad stuff starts to happen, and this movie really does become more about Norman Bates' character. Now, there are some movies where everyone says, like, oh, this is the best thing ever, and then I end up watching it, it's like, it wasn't that good. And the same thing happened to me watching this movie when I watched The Godfather. Like, going into it, I was thinking, this can't be that good. Then I watched it, I was like, you gotta believe the hype, man. Psycho is one of the best movies I've ever seen. And this is not just because it's historically significant. I tried to, put that away when I watch a movie that's old and, well respected. It really is, on its own terms, a very well made movie. In fact, take note that, back then you couldn't show that much violence, so technically Psycho doesn't really have any visible violence in it. But take note that back then it was so scary that audiences stopped taking a bath. Because, the shower scene, and that's incredible. Anyway, but let's get into it. First of all, because Psycho is a 60s movie, you, I mean, typically you don't really have huge sets and stuff. And if I remember correctly, Psycho didn't necessarily have like the biggest budget. And you have really small sets here, but they are used very well. They're decorated very nicely, and it really pulls off the creepy vibe. Bates Motel looks really creepy without being absurd. It really does look like any other motel you'd see on the side of the road. And all of Norman Bates' taxidermy and like just the pictures on the walls, stuff like that, they really do help add to this atmosphere. And if that wasn't creepy enough, the Bates household is even creepier. You always see it like propped up on that hill, and it looks absolutely imposing, and it's just frightening just to see it. And when you get inside it, you do not feel safe because it just drips creepiness. And of course, when people mention the word Hitchcockian, like I did in my last review for Grand Piano, Hitchcockian, in my opinion, usually refers to like cinematography wise, because Alfred Hitchcock really knows how to use his camera. And even if this movie's in black and white, Hitchcock really knows how to use the blacks and the whites and the angles and the lighting just to really support his story. I mean, every frame in this movie is very suspenseful. Even at the beginning, when Marion is just kind of running away from this cop who's following her, it's just really freaky. You could really talk about so much stuff in this movie that uses cinematography well. Like again, the house on the hill, just conversation between Marion and Norman is filmed so well and so creepily. And there's this one shot that sticks out in my mind that completely blew my mind because I didn't know how they did it. Like especially back then in the '60s, it's when there's a scene where Norman is talking to his mother and they're inside the room. You don't see them, and the camera just kind of goes up the stairs and like twists itself over the door until Norman comes out. And it was such a really well constructed shot. I just don't really know how they did it. I don't want to know how they did it. Some might argue that this was the first real horror movie, real slasher movie, but it's usually put under the genre of thriller nowadays, suspense. And I guess, yeah, it is that, but to me, it really is kind of like a mystery because stuff happens in this movie, and the mystery just keeps building. People just keep finding out more and more things. The whole mother of Norman Bates mystery is being unraveled slowly. And this is probably not a spoiler at this point, but just in case people haven't seen this yet, I won't spoil it. But just say that somewhere like before the first half of the movie ends, like a main character dies, and even after that happens, the movie keeps going because you realize it's not really about that character anymore. Like the focus has shifted, and it's about something completely different. The editing in this movie is amazing because there's so much visual storytelling going on here. Just you know, the camera focusing on different things, and you piece it together in your mind. You realize, oh, okay, she's running away from this. This is her plan. Oh, this is what Norman Bates is like, and it's great. The music too by Bernard Herrmann is really classic at this point, and it is very scary. Like, whereas the visuals aren't necessarily frightening, the music is just so hair-raising that it adds that layer to the film. I mean, who would expect that screeching violins would just be like the death toll in this movie? Like, whenever you hear that, it's just, I can imagine the audiences in the 60s kind of freaking out. But the thing that makes this movie one of the best, in my opinion, is really is the triple threat of writing, directing, and acting. First of all, the script by Joseph Stefano is incredible. Watching this movie again, you notice that there's so much little like placements of little clever foreshadowing, and the dialogue really supports the paranoia. Whenever two characters are talking to each other, it always feels like someone's gonna find out something else that the other person knows because there's so many characters here who have secrets, and it's really cool. What's interesting with the characters is that they're all so surprisingly filled with personality, and a lot of these characters aren't there for that long, especially in the second half. But it doesn't feel repetitive because I don't know. It really does feel like they're all in this one mystery together, and their personalities are strong enough. They're written well enough for them to be memorable. And this movie really does boil down to this great kind of psychological story about a boy and his mother. And looking back at it, like whenever other movies try to do like the psychological trauma kind of thing, it really you just think a Psycho. Really, it did it first, and it arguably does it best. The acting in this movie is great, also across the board. Janet Leigh and Vera Miles, they do feel like sisters, even if they're never in a scene together. But even the actor who plays Sam, John Gavin, the guy who plays Arbogast, who is Martin Balsam, they all fit the roles very well. But no one steals the show from Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins' acting in this movie is still some of the best I've ever seen. He just has this niceness to him, but at the same time, he's so you can tell he's there's something wrong with him. He's just insane, but he hides it so well. It's so hard to talk about his performance because it's so nuanced. Like you just look at his facial expressions and stuff, and you see the struggle between wanting to be a normal person and being tied down by his mother. The great thing about his performance here as Norman Bates is that he actually makes the guy come off as sympathetic, which would be difficult for other actors. I Vince Vaughn, but Anthony Perkins really does pull it off, and Norman Bates becomes like classic character in cinema. And of course, Alfred Hitchcock. And what else is there to say about him? He's one of the best directors ever. He really keeps the suspense going, and he really leaves you guessing. When you watch this movie again, it's not obvious what's happening. There's no obvious clue, and yet the surprise when it comes, it's still surprising even when you watch it again. And he always makes you feel like you're on tightrope again when characters are talking. It always feels like something bad's gonna happen, and credit to a great filmmaker. Psycho is a masterpiece. It really is like one of the best movies of all time. And I highly recommend that you watch it if you like movies in general, not just like thriller horror movies. It's not that scary, don't worry. It's not scary, yeah. But it really is like film school at this point. It kind of might be dated. I know I can understand if you find it dated, but watching it is just like, this is how you act, this is how you write, this is how you direct, this is how you do everything right. Alright guys, have you seen Psycho? Do you love it like I do? Do you think there's some faults, especially with the psychiatrist at the end, which I didn't mind, though I was so into the movie I didn't mind that psychiatrist part at the end. But whatever you guys thought, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.